Я понял, да. Я стараюсь как-то время расходовать. Да. Да. У меня сейчас, ты не понимаешь, у меня зубы крошатся. Что непонятно вот в этом есть. А хочется сырое это есть, да. Да. На терку это долго, да. Хочется, потому что ты себя чувствуешь лучше свежаком, да, понимаете. Да. Да, да. Можно делать как бы морковный сок, а потом со жмыхом вместе это делать, как бы получается пюре, потом, да. Можно, кстати, да. Короче, да, делать ночью. Да, я пока это самое. Да. Блендер, я знаю, такая штука, которая. Да. Неважно, короче, да. Свежак и сразу сажайте. А, ну да, ну это тоже, да. Ну хорошо, яблоки так можно есть. Фрукты тоже, да. Ну да, аппетитничать, жаждет пива. Это я тоже смотрел. Сода коммершал синхрониз, да. У меня мама такой же рак был. Я надеюсь. Наверное, ненависть запечатана. Это какая-то ненависть твоя просто. С себя начинаю, да. Да, психушка, да. Советка, да. Ну это женское, да, я тоже так считаю, как-то, понимаешь? Ну и что, ну и умри тогда, да, понимаете? У нас, да. Ну у тебя только твое тело есть. Мне не помогает, мне сейчас жены нету, она мне не бережет, меня не помогает, так сказать, не стережет, да. Не знаю, если бы их несколько было, как бы. Ну, родня, понятно. Я имею в виду, да. Атаки нету просто, понимаешь? Вот ты сядешь за инструмент и поймешь, что у тебя нету атаки просто, да. Потому что там молотки, как пружина просто, и все, да. И так, ну, и это кайф, я тебе скажу, да. Вот как из данных, да, как, да. Ну и ладно, и что теперь? Тебя так говорит. Ну, она уже поздно. Да, я понял. Да, да, длительность какая вообще? Наверное, пупсик, да. Hey man, hey Soul Spark. Все подряд нарезал и ешьте, пожалуйста. Ну да. Придется вот так вот, чтобы juicy. Да, вот это тоже надо вчера. А нет, это не то. Не надо, значит. Рапсодия у меня есть, второй том. Самый известный том нет. Можно все известные. Джерри. Эй, don't cry. Да, большое делаю. Да. Lazy your, you. Да, take it from me, да. Вот она была. Да, понимаете. Вот так.
представьте себя сидящим за фортепиано и с увлечением играющим невероятно красивую музыку. Что вы чувствуете в этот момент? Прилив сил, воодушевление, энергию, любовь и чувство.
Наоборот, это пиздил уже меня, за себе так говорит. Так я, что тебе могу делать? Ух ты, чё это? Рик-выкар. Ну нет, понимает он тебя просто. Гимназия. Гимназия. Где? Сахар плохо влияет на зубы, это я точно как говорю, да. Сегодня выяснено. Без меня все знают вообще. говорит наоборот, да. Да. Немножечко. Да. Depends on это самое, да. Quality. Да, да. Да, наоборот, это наоборот.
Are you feeling heartbroken over a copyright claim on your latest video? Look, it's not you, it's YouTube. Here's the deal, guys. There's new laws that are coming out that are forcing YouTube and other social media platforms like Twitch, Facebook, and Instagram to be more strict with their copyright flags. So don't let your video...
The same. Да. Так, 20 минут уже прошло, что ли? Да. Блин, охренеть, это еще и есть. It is fine, it is very well, very well. Good. Social media platform. Ширан.
The Catholic Church never banned the tritone, this musical interval. Nobody thought that it would summon the devil. In fact, in this 13th century French Christmas song, you can very clearly hear a tritone in the second measure between E and E flat. The tune is called Vivant Omnes and was written by French composer Perrotin at the Notre Dame Cathedral, which I check is, yes, it is in fact a Catholic church, and that is a tritone.
This interval was called the Diabolus in musica.
So there was this chord that was banned in the Middle Ages by the
This myth just won't die. It is one of the longest running myths in music theory, and it's kind of part of contemporary internet music culture.
You could have just summoned a freaking demon.
You got your memes, you got your TikToks, you got Jacob Collier repeating this myth on his music theory interview that he did for Wired.
So all people could say was, this must be Satan. This is the devil speaking through music.
Today, I want to go deep, so that this video is not just one long actually, and explore just how this myth came to be, and why today we think of it as the devil in music, and why 1,000 years ago they didn't. Let's get into it. This video was brought to you by CuriosityStream and my streaming service Nebula, where you can watch a companion video to this one.
In jazz, we like dissonance, and it's really interesting.
Yes, Jacob, summon me through the power of jazz and the tritone. It is through that sound I draw my power, my corrupting influence over mortal man. Behold, harmony most unjust. Oh, God. Devil needs some water. Part 1, tritones, baby. This bad boy right here is a monochord. Invented in ancient Sumeria, it's a device used for measuring musical notes based on dividing a string into equal proportions. I don't have a monochord, but I got one better. I got a bass guitar. So if we take a string and we divide it into 9 equal sections, you're going to find a whole step or a tone at the first of the 9 divisions. This is the note A. We can do that again, measuring up from A to find another tone or whole step. We can do that a third time to to find the third tone, the tritone. We call that an augmented fourth or a diminished fifth today. It's the note that's in between two perfect consonances, the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth. And historically, that's been considered hard to sing. In 335 BC, the Greek theorist Aristoxenus said that the melodic distances of a fourth and fifth should never be altered, otherwise they might sound out of tune. Likewise, in the 2nd century AD, Cleonidas calls the melodic distance of a tritone a diaphony, or two notes which don't blend together. One theory that might explain the origin of the phrase diabolos in musica comes from looking at the roots of the ancient Greek word diabolos itself. Dia, meaning through, and bolos, to throw or to separate. Two notes which are thrown apart. So diabolos might relate to the word diaphony, which means the separation of pitches, which is an early word for dissonance. And in the Middle Ages, the tritone was definitely considered a dissonance. In A History of Consonance and Dissonance, James Tenney catalogues 30 separate musical treatises from the 9th century to the 16th century in Europe, and they all categorize the tritone as a dissonance. Arabic texts from the same time, like the Kitab al-Musica al-Kabir, similarly appeal to Greek music theory, call a tritone a dissonance. But in all of these textbooks going back thousands of years, there is simply no mention of the devil, the satanic, or the occult. And believe me, people have tried to find it to no avail. The tritone simply was considered a dissonance like any other. Spare your lies. You know as well as I do that the tritone was especially to be avoided, for it might summon me. Well, okay, true, fine. People did especially avoid the tritone, but not because they thought it would summon the devil. They just thought it was hard to sing. You can hear that in examples of contemporary music, like Even Flow by Pearl Jam, for example. Listen to the verse melody. The verse melody goes back and forth between F sharp and C, a descending melodic tritone, the third and the flat 7 in the key of D. That jump is difficult to nail perfectly. You can kind of hear how waffly the pitch is on the low C. Now, no shade on Eddie Vedder. If we auto-tune this like contemporary music production might, we would lose all the rich characteristics of the melody. But that doesn't change the fact that that might be hard to sing. Part 2. The Carolingian Super Ultra Hyper Mega Metadorian Scale. What? What? Oh, it's so stupid.
At a time, the tritone was seen as being of the devil by Catholics and was banned. Wild to think that in the 9th century, the tritone was banned. So apparently the tritone interval was once banned in the church because it referenced the devil.
The music in the medieval church started out as chant, plain chant. Sometimes you may have heard of it as Gregorian chant. You know the sound, it's the sound from the Halo soundtrack, yeah, that thing. Sometimes harmony was added, which was a practice called organum, where monks would sing the same melody down a perfect fourth and perfect fifth, all in parallel fifths and fourths. For what it's worth, this is the Halo theme if it was sung in organum. Sounds pretty sick. There's a problem with this, though, that Carolingian monks noticed when trying to harmonize this way. The 9th century music treatise and Harry Potter spell, Musica Incariatus, Musica Incariatus, notes that the sounds at the interval of a fourth do not all, without exception, produce consonances throughout the whole series of tones. So what does that mean? So the monks would go and try and harmonize using what we would call the major scale today, but they ran across this interval which just didn't seem to work as well. It seemed to pull itself apart. And to explain why that might be,
I'm afraid we need to use math.
Let's go back to the monochord. Acoustically, what's happening when we divide the string into 9 equal segments is that A is vibrating 9 times for every 8 times G is vibrating, the open string. It has a 9 to 8 ratio. The same follows for the note B. B has a 9 to 8 ratio back to A, which in turn has a 9 to 8 ratio back to G. The same thing for the tritone. C sharp has a 9 to 8 ratio back to B, has a 9 to 8 ratio back to A, has a 9 to 8 ratio back to G, which ends up being a very complicated acoustic relationship. C sharp vibrates 729 times for every 512 times G vibrates. You end up with this acoustic relationship which is complicated and might sound like a dissonance, a rough sound, a sound which doesn't harmonize well. Now, that doesn't mean you can't harmonize with tritones.
If you wanna run away with me, I know a galaxy and I can take you for a ride.
But probably because of this acoustic relationship, it's a lot harder to. So if you just take the scale as is, you'll eventually run into the tritone, an interval which has that complicated acoustic relationship, which sounds more separated than something like a perfect fourth, which sounds a lot more rested.
There are 12 half steps in an octave. In the medieval times, playing two notes that were 6 half steps apart, flatted fifth or a tritone, was known as the devil's interval and banned in parts of Europe.
One solution offered by the Musica Incaliatus is sometimes called the Daisian scale. The Daisian scale is built from 4 tetrachords, which go whole step, half step, whole step. The first tetrachord is called the graves, and then that pattern repeats up again a perfect fifth, giving you the finales. This repeats again up a fifth to give you the superiores, and then again to give you the excelentes. There are also 2 leftover notes on top, aptly named the remanentes. This gives you an 18-note scale, which doesn't repeat at the octave. So in certain registers, like the graves, you might sing a B flat, but in other registers, like the superiores, you might sing a B natural, which is a little odd, but the result of this is that you can harmonize in perfect fifths all the way up and down the scale without ever hitting a tritone. So it's a little unclear as to whether or not the monks actually thought in terms of this Daisian scale, or whether or not it was just some kind of theoretical concept. But what's really interesting is you can draw comparisons between it and Jacob Collier's super ultra hyper mega meta Lydian scale.
You rise like
Yeah. Both it and the Daisian scale are scales that do not repeat at the octave and instead are built on stacked tetrachords at the perfect fifth. The main difference, of course, is that the Daisian scale is over 1,000 years old. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it has been said, see, this is new? It has already been done in the ages before us. You see? You quote scripture at me, but that just proves my point. They avoided the tritone because they knew its power.
You know, in the Middle Ages, the tritone was identified as the music of the devil.
The church actually banned composers from using tritones in the Middle Ages. Church, hundreds of years ago, forbid this interval.
The devil's note. Like in the old days, you weren't allowed to use that note.
In the old days, you weren't allowed to use that note. Part 3. The old days, when you weren't allowed to use that note. 12th century France saw rapid urbanization, which brought with it the rise of the great cathedrals. Like, of course, the Notre Dame Cathedral, consecrated in Paris in May of 1182. And like in any period of relative economic stability, people like to get down. The song Topsy-Turvy from Disney's The Hunchback of Notre Dame depicts the French medieval tradition of the Feast of Fools, a raucous celebration where ecclesiastical tradition was thrown out the window. This was usually held during the Feast of the Circumcision, and people liked to get drunk. Upon seeing the bacchanal degeneracy taking place in the new Cathedral of Notre Dame, the papal legate Pierre de Capuano got pissed and wrote back to the Vatican of how many egregious and flagrant acts were committed, frequently defiled not only by foul language, but even by bloodshed. Later accounts of the Parisian Feast of Fools told of how asses were led into the pulpit and sausages were consumed on the altar, among other pernicious acts. Get your sausages here, who wants to commit some blasphemy? To stem the tide of this degeneracy, in 1198, the Parisian